We're very excited to be hosting Dr. Emily Fox-Kales as part of one of our Meet the Author programs. And as the semester winds down, we do still have a few other great programs lined up, which include an evening with Al Vega, which is tomorrow night, and also a poetry reading featuring local poet Louise Gluck, which will be on November 30th. So more information on all of our upcoming library programs are out on the sign-in table, as well as comment cards. We really appreciate your feedback on all of these programs, so please take the time after this program to fill out your comments and feedback, which we take into consideration for the planning of future events. We also would love to expand our library supporter group, so please consider becoming a supporter of the library. We love offering programs like these, and it'll help us keep these programs going into the future. We are filming today's event, which will be available on Northeastern University Library's YouTube and iTunes University channels. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter for more information about library's programs and services. And now let's just jump into today's event. So the author series encourages dialogue on significant contemporary questions and brings together alumni, faculty, students, staff, and members of our community to debate and discuss these issues. Today's Meet the Author program, featuring Dr. Emily Fox-Kales, is made possible by our co-sponsors, the Northeastern Bookstore, Northeastern Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies program, the Northeastern University Cinema Studies program, the Northeastern Department of Communications, and the Northeastern Department of Psychology. I would also like to thank the library's Programming and Communications Committee for their work in putting this event together, and especially Kelsey Strout, our Marketing and Events Co-op, who does a fantastic job coordinating all of the logistics for these events. Dr. Emily Fox-Kales is an accomplished clinician who specializes in the treatment of eating disorders and body image disturbances. She is also an expert media specialist who teaches film psychology and gender studies in the departments of psychology and cinema studies at Northeastern. She is the clinical instructor in the Department of Psychiatry, Faculty of Medicine at Harvard University, and clinical associate at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts. She is also the executive director of Feeding Ourselves, a Boston-based outpatient program for eating disorders. Dr. Fox-Kales' research on dieting and binge eating has been published in many professional journals, and she has appeared as a speaker on eating disorders and body image in national media such as the New York Times, Psychology Today, and Shape magazine, as well as numerous television and radio shows. She is also the faculty director of New Cope, a university-wide education and media literacy program. She is an expert in the field of pop culture and the psychosocial narratives of gender and the women's body. Her recent work in the area of film and psychoanalysis has been published in the International Journal of Psychoanalysis and the Journal of Cultural Studies, among others. Today, Dr. Fox-Kales is here to talk about her book, Body Shots, which examines the culture of eating disorders in Hollywood and how the body narratives of celebrities have created a new normal of weight obsession among media watchers. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Emily Fox-Kales.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me back there? I think I'm wired. Okay. Thank you so much for that very nice intro. And thank you to all of the library staff who have been really wonderfully coordinated and wonderfully gracious about providing this opportunity for me to talk about my favorite topic, which is a blend, a very interdisciplinary blend of both what I've done for my clinical career, working with people who have eating disorders, and my great love, which is movies and pop culture. So it's been a natural convergence of a long time interest. But the reason I wrote Body Shots is because it too is a convergence of what I call a perfect storm. As an eating disorder specialist, I couldn't help but notice over the years that eating disorders was no longer restricted to a very small subset of the population who ended up needing to be treated for life-threatening anorexia or bulimia, but rather that everybody I was running into, not just on campuses, but all over the country really, had this kind of uncomfortable relationship with food, with weight, and most importantly, with how they looked. And I don't think it's any surprise to any of you sitting here. You've all been born and raised in what I do call the culture of eating disorders. And it's a culture which shares norms, like any culture does. But these norms, and I use the word norm advisedly, are in many ways not normal at all. By clinical standards, they are pathological. But what we have done, largely through media, popular culture, and the circulation of images, we have normalized. We have taken something that's basically troubled and often not quite pathological, but approximating it, and turning it into something that we all aspire to. So who do we aspire to more but movie stars or pop culture stars or celebrities? We can't escape it. The aspiring images that they provide for us get so circulated through our world of screens. You know, we live in a world of screens, big screens, little screens, screens that babies can now use their thumbs to roll down and look at mom's pictures. We're always looking at images. So I began to think about the proliferation of images of certain bodies, somehow dovetailing with this exponential rise in troubled eating disordered behavior. We now see eating disorders among old grandmas. We see it among young girls in the age of 4 or 5. We see it in men, as we discussed, some of us in class just the other day. Male eating disorders are on the rise. And not just in America. We have now a globalization of these problems. So we have young high school girls in Mexico abusing diuretics and laxatives. We have women in the United Arab Emirates being now diagnosed with anorexia at very high rates. We have middle school girls in Tanzania binging and purging. How did this happen in these cultures that we never thought would have these kinds of modern psychiatric illnesses? Well, they do. As the Globe columnist Ellen Goodman once said drolly, we can export our insecurity all over the world through our entertainment industry. We can make anyone anywhere feel perfectly rotten about their size and their shape. And she's right. So let's talk a little bit then about how that happens. And those of you who have studied film with me know we talk about the cinematic elements, the formal film elements that are truly devices of enchantment, because in some ways they're designed to create this illusion of something real in the 2 hours that we're watching this, often in the dark, or at least in the old days in the dark. Now we watch it maybe in other settings on a very small screen. But we're still being enchanted. We're still being, in many ways, put to sleep in a way that we can suspend our disbelief, as the poet Wordsworth once said. And we're willing to suspend that disbelief because it's such a luscious pleasure to enter into the world of the screen action. But these devices, in many cases, in popular films, are designed to also reinforce this culture I was talking about, which is very firmly based on what we call externality, or what you and I might call looksism. You know, really looking good on the outside defines our identity, tells us who we are. What is our social commerce? Well, how we look. And inextricably linked, forever linked to that culture of looksism, is body dissatisfaction. There's always something wrong with us that we can fix. And we'll see in a minute how many industries that surround this, this body scrutiny can profit by that. So let's take a look, first of all, at this notion that Hollywood as an industry does trade, as has been said, in the impossible, not just the impossible dream of the characters that you see on the screen, but the impossible look. And what is that look constructed by? Well, some things that have always been there in the movie industry. I mean, it's no news. There's always been the magic that lights can create, hiding maybe the star's less than perfect features. Makeup, which we award every Oscar season. Makeup can transform the body, the face, the look, for sure. As does camera angles, which can elongate a body, which is so important in a culture that absolutely worships a body type for females that's like a high fashion model, 5'10", 110 in weight. So we know that the camera can make the actress look like she's on the runway of the high fashion show. And now, of course, we use body doubles in the most creative and sometimes absurd way, which I hopefully will show you a shot of in a minute, so that the body of these beautiful stars is even more beautiful, right? More perfect. Probably the biggest shift in the last several years for sure, and even before that, the digitization of imagery that you all can do, you know, when you make your Christmas card images to send out. You can sculpt with Photoshop, take off those inches from your hips and send out on what you look like for your Facebook greeting at Christmas time. We can always shape and perfect our image. But that image is really beyond the reach of most of us, most human bodies, even the bodies of the stars, without doing something pretty draconian, pretty drastic, and often pretty self-destructive to your own body through cosmetic surgery, through fasting, through extreme dieting, how to get that body, through over bodybuilding, how to get that body perfect. But the perfect, does it exist? Does it exist anywhere? Even on the screen, maybe for those moments of flashing images. That's where they exist. Okay, can I have the next slide? Now, some of you guys have seen some of these images. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but just to point out that this body ideal for females of this attenuated, long, skinny, skeletal image that you see on the right is very recent in the history of what we call the image of beauty, the ideal body. Most typically, and I'm exaggerating here because the image on the left comes from Paleolithic Europe, 35,000 years ago, Ice Age times, a fertility goddess whose body ideal was about procreation, right? You know, survival, perpetuation of the species, things that are really very, very necessary to the evolution of humankind. Next slide, please. When you go into the Renaissance and European art ideals, you see famous artists, Titian in the middle, Rubens on the right, glorifying the female body in a very fleshy, rotund, again, large breasts, large hips, somebody who looks like she's really there to maybe breed babies, make babies, be fleshy, be maternal, a look that was revered for centuries by artists. And then, of course, we get to these moments, these interesting historical moments. So no prompting. Images on the left from where? What period in history? the flapper from the 20s, right? And on the right, Twiggy, 1968, 69. And remember when we talked about it in class, we say that at this period in time, in the 20s, women have just gotten the vote. There's a kind of kicking up their heels, a feeling of liberation. When Twiggy comes along in the late 60s, the second wave feminism seemed to give women the opportunity to really make economic and political and social strides. And yet, and this is a lot of feminist theorists who have speculated that it may be that as the power and the paradigm shift occurs at these periods in history, women start to look awfully androgynous, don't they? They look like little boys. They sure don't look like ready to stay home and bake brownies and raise 5 children. But in this process of shifting the body ideal to a very different look, notice what it might require of the normal-sized female in this case, a real strong and strict curtailing of food, of a kind of denial of maybe some of the pleasures of eating, a highly anxious then relationship to food, which can very often lead to eating disorders. And that's when we began to see in the 70s in America certainly an exponential rise in eating disordered behavior. Next slide, please. Eve Ensler, some of you have seen or read the Vagina Monologues here on campus. It was performed. She sort of, I think, ironically points out that a lot of the good power of certainly liberated women gets distracted into dieting and restricting and maybe not even having a lot of energy because you're hungry a lot of the time. I certainly see this in clinical work where very professional women are coming to see me because they're not performing as well as they can at work because they're struggling with an eating disorder. Okay. Where does pop media and pop culture come into all of this? Well, the media doesn't create eating disorders. As we've often said, correlation is not causality. But the media circulates it. And in our culture, it does it in an extremely, in many ways, confusing and dualistic manner. There's a lot of warning in pop culture about the dangers of getting too thin, the dangers of identifying with Kate Moss or whatever the model of the hour is. The dangers that could lead to this kind of acute anorectic outcome here. This is a recovering anorectic looking at her image from when she was skeletal. At the same time, notice the positioning of this ad, this cover from People. So here's Kate Moss looking really quite, looking out at you with a very a gaze that draws you in, a little defiant, a little bit saying, I am who I am. Look at my wonderful, skinny, food-denying, controlled body. And in the lower left is offered an alternative, a larger size blonde woman there in the lower corner who might represent a different body ideal. But even in the relationship of the image on the cover, the casual reader is going to be drawn to the very image that's being upheld as perhaps a warning. Images trump text in popular culture, and that is what I think makes the dent in people's own identification with the celebrities they may worship. Okay, we're going to come back to this one in a moment. So let's go forward and forward again. And just stay for a little bit longer on celebrity bodies. So just as in popular culture, popular press, popular gossip magazines, the body parts, it's not just the bodies anymore, it's the body parts of our celebrities are subject to enormous scrutiny. Every which way, the public is invited to comment on who looks like they lost weight or gained weight or got a nose, well, not a nose job, a boob job is more like it. What we're mimicking, what we're supposed to be learning in some ways is not just critiquing and deconstructing the body of our celebrities, but that in turn encourages us to think of our own bodies this way and to talk about the parts of ourselves that could use some fixing. We just finished participating, many of you guys did participate in Fat Talk Free Week, and you found out maybe how hard it was not to engage in fat talk. You know, fat talk is like, oh, I really hate my arms. I wish I could tone up, you know, my flabby arms, or look at the cellulite of my legs. We are getting that kind of normalization of that process of fat talk and body dissatisfaction circulating widely through media. So let's take a quick look. You all know this iconic, now iconic image of Oprah Winfrey, who stands as a kind of, I think, both victim and role model to millions of women all over the world, older women particularly, who, when she was able to successfully shed 88 pounds of fat, which she now wheels in this wheelbarrow, people were absolutely thrilled for her, just as she regained it a few months later or weeks later. Everyone mourned for her. So this process of yo-yo dieting and starving and stuffing becomes the drama of the hour, and we're all supposed to be, and we are, very much enraptured by her success and fascinated by her failure. Next, please. We could go on and on. I won't spend any time here except to, I mean, you see this even out of the peripheral vision of your eye when you're on this supermarket line. They're always there. The tips that you too could then integrate into your own daily lifestyle to get a hot body. Next, please. We've talked about this one. I love it because, again, kind of advertising really pretty dangerous kinds of behaviors, detox shakes, and intense sweating. Gwyneth Paltrow does it, shouldn't you? And of course, again, that body dissatisfaction that she struggles with becomes something aspirational for us. If she's unhappy with her body, we should sure be unhappy with ours. Angelina Jolie is here announcing, or presumably announcing, that she hasn't eaten much on her skinny, it's called the movie dieting. So the movie diet for movie stars consists of a $700 bottle of Bordeaux and little else. And if you're sharing it with Brad Pitt, I suppose a little goes a long way. But at the same time, she's demonstrating, you know, she has it all. She has Brad Pitt, she has a great bottle of wine, and she has essentially a size 0 body. I actually went through some of this literature. It was kind of hard going, but I did. I slogged through all of these magazines, and let's take a look at the next one as well. I went through their purported food diaries and really tried to see what they or their publicists were saying about their eating behavior. And in the next slide, I actually then scaled on, this is a psychiatric instrument we use to determine how serious somebody's eating problems are. And most of these celebrity diets and exercise routines actually would make them symptomatic of an eating disorder. So when I say normalize the pathological, I'm not exaggerating. Next slide, please. Some of us have talked about the websites that appear and disappear on the internet called Thinspiration or Pro-Anorexia, a kind of online community where people who are into self-starvation encourage each other to continue this by using movie stars and celebrities as iconic inspirations to lead you on to food denial. And here you have this extraordinary photograph of Hilary Swank, who, interestingly enough, was able to have the courage, as we thought of it, to go into film roles where she was anything but stylized Hollywood beauty, but to recapture, in a sense, her movie image as the victim in Boys Don't Cry or in a prize fighter in $1 Million Baby. She recuperates her image in this Malibu Beach workout picture where she's literally rib cage showing prominently, beautiful body, flying through the air. Again, the perfect impossible, perhaps, and yet captured forever as an object of worship. But where does it appear? It appears on a website for anorectic behavior. Okay. All right, let's go back now to that image I showed. And some of you sitting here should recognize, one more, right away. What movie does this come from? Mulholland Drive, right. And those of us who have discussed it recently know that the image of the woman on the right is somebody who is suffering from amnesia, presumably in the narrative, and she comes out of the bathroom. She is asked what her name is. She doesn't know. And she looks over her shoulder. She's holding up, this is a mirror. And behind her on the wall is a movie poster from a wonderful film noir called Gilda, starring none other than an actress named Rita Hayworth. When asked her name then, the woman on the right says, "My name is Rita." And the process here of screen identification is beautifully rendered in this shot because she's gazing into a mirror which ordinarily should be showing a reflection of her face, but instead it's Rita, the actress, the movie star, that then becomes her persona throughout the narrative of this film. Now, the idea of identifying with a star then is not new. It's been there ever since we've had these larger-than-life images to observe. But let's take a look. Now let's go back to up to Kill Bill. How some of those cinematic devices I refer to of enchantment can unconsciously encourage our processes of screen identification in ways that prime us then to want to change our bodies, want us to look other than the way we look. So some of you know this movie well. This is Elle, played by Daryl Hannah, who is on her way to, she's an assassin. She's on her way to murder one of her enemies. But notice how she's dressed. Okay, let's take a look. So let's go back to that and double click on the image in the frame. Yeah, thank you. Outfit, the way in which the camera is designed to allow us to enjoy that image, but at the same time, to really check her out. The director of this film, Tarantino, was famous to have said, "I want to make a movie about women martial artists." And in this film, the women are martial artists. He says, "I want them to be more than eye candy for guys." But I have to doubt that this isn't, that he's a little disingenuous here. It's eye candy maybe for everybody. And through the process of identification, unconsciously, we are thinking to ourselves, something about our own maybe legs that are too short, or how we should maybe dress, or what it takes to be this really glamorous killer. Let's just show without, can you go forward one, please? Beyond that. Okay. Anybody here recognize what movie? Oh, sorry. This is the #1 film comedy of all time, Some Like It Hot. And notice how it's a cinematic convention to use what we call the view from behind. These are two supposedly women, and we're supposed to be checking them out, just like the Daryl Hannah figure. But let's take a look at it for a second. So go in the center and double click. And immediately you should be figuring out these are not ladies, but rather two guys in drag. Now, in just a moment, a real woman is going to be coming their way. And just notice what happens to their own eyes and how we are identifying with their look at Marilyn Monroe as she comes forward into the frame, very much into the deep surface. Watch their eyes now. And there's that view from behind. And here comes the dirty joke that Billy Wilder couldn't resist. Okay, thank you. It's just about the end. So the notion of bringing the woman's body up for our contemplation is far from new. It was obviously gone on in many, many other decades. But again, in a sense, the exaggeration of the body's slenderness for the female form is well beyond the reach. Marilyn Monroe was a size 14, maybe, very much within the reach of the average American female size and shape. Not just of her era, but actually there are more female bodies today that naturally are in that zone than size 0. Okay. Now, many of you have been watching, thinking, talking about Black Swan as an example of not just hallucinatory processes, but as an example of an anorectic ballet zeal for perfection. And I'm not going to show you anything of the film. Most of you have seen it. But I'm very interested in the discourse that takes place around a movie star's work in a film, where what goes on outside the frame of the movie bleeds into this public space of commentary about the body. So here's Natalie Portman sharing her secrets, as it were, or just a quick, it's very quick, her feeling about her performance. So that the actor is kind of an athlete, right? You know, the valiant job of denying the body, which she did while she prepared for that role, of the perfect ballerina body, that wonderful, almost Homeric epithet, at the same time that she's modeling the denial of what she loves, the carbs that she is now going to be able to indulge in as she's completed her performance. So this notion, again, that gets perpetuated of denial, the heroism, the valor of her ability to self-deny, the reward of stardom, and then, of course, her diving into her previously forbidden craving for carbs is again a kind of modeling of our own tendencies to starve and stuff and withhold and, you know, Friday night, let it all hang out, because Monday we're going back to some kind of form of restraint or working out. So we'll go on. These are all in body shots. I'm sure those of you who have read the book have seen how the narratives of individuals who watch the films that we're talking about here suggest the actual day-to-day impact it has had on their behavior, on their relationship to food, on the way they work out. It's very real. It's not an abstract phenomenon. I'm not going to have time to show all of these, so I'm going to skip this one. In my chapter on makeover movies, so I think I'm very interested in the valorization here of the idea of reforming our less than perfect bodies. So there's a lot of urgency, there's a lot of encouragement to shape up by changing the way we look through the magic of aesthetic medicine, in other words, cosmetic surgery. So whether you're a bride who isn't beautiful enough before your big day, whether you're somebody whose boyfriend doesn't think she's sexy anymore because she's not toned enough, whether you're a guy who somehow looks a little too wimpy, you really need to shape up. So we'll skip the reality TV one, but I just want to show how big an industry aesthetic medicine is, and the increase in procedures to tone and make your body tauter is thriving, even in recessionary times. People save their money to run out at lunch hour for a Botox treatment. Many of you all have told me about high school graduation gifts are no longer the convertible. It could be, a breast implant or a job of some sort on your body. There is an eating disorder called body dysmorphic disorder, which actually we treat as a clinical entity. Many people who go to the cosmetic surgeon again and again and again, obsessed about a part of themselves they hate, are diagnosed with this disorder, but plastic surgeons are not interested in treating the disorder. They're interested in changing whatever it is they want changed. So let's take a look at probably one of the best-known makeover movies, and pay attention here to how, again, the camera, even though this is a movie that basically comes out with a message that it's what's inside that counts, pay attention to how this brief interchange where Anne Hathaway, a size 6, heaven forbid, becomes a size 0. Observed in this clip is how, despite its purported message of inner beauty and inner good values that the Anne Hathaway, in the end comes back to, she leaves this slick world, this superficial world, to go back to her job as a hardcore journalist and her boyfriend. The imagery of the film is not really consistent with that message, is it? Because that long sequence of Andy now in her beautiful, wonderful, constantly changing wardrobe is not really a film narrative moment, is it? It's a kind of fashion show with Madonna playing in the background, Vogue soundtrack. The notion also of where people's eyes go, not only her boyfriend, but notice how the women, interestingly, also Giselle Bundchen being one of them, we have not just the male contemplative gaze at her body, but the female contemplative or rivalrous gaze, very much encouraging the viewer to identify then with the object of this gaze's incredible transformation into higher status, and the camera, of course, going from the bottom of her wonderful boots to the top of her coiffed hairdo. Again, belying, as Hollywood movies do so beautifully, with the visual imagery so compelling, putting our critical faculties to sleep and making us then a little bit kind of vulnerable to this process of identification. Okay, I don't have time. I'll just show you really quickly the next. There's a chapter in Body Shots that many of you know about the stigmatization of the large body. I love this image from The Biggest Loser because poor Bernie here, to me, looks very much like someone on a slave auction block, and his crime is getting fat. And next, please, let's take a quick look at this. If you watch makeover shows for fat people, the narrative is about punishing them, whipping them into shape for their sin of obesity. Sorry. Again, through popular reality shows and makeover shows, we also are encouraging and sanctioning a kind of punitive attitude toward, if you listen to the voiceover, someone who's let herself, lost control, has no willpower. The fat body is the stigmatized body, the unacceptable body that doesn't have the kind of taut, tight, firm control that we as a culture revere, and we're supposed to identify them with the process not of just humiliation but of reformation. You know, there's always some amazing trainer that for their own good is going to help them submit to the requisite shape-up torture. Okay, we don't have time to talk about weightism, which is again a culturally sanctioned prejudice in many ways that grows out of our medical concern with obesity. And you all know, here's the famous body double I referred to, Gwyneth Paltrow playing in Shallow Hal, where Jack Black is bemused that he's really just gone to bed with a 300-pound woman. Gwyneth Paltrow, as you remember, wears a fat suit. But in the shot on the left, as she is about to reveal her real slender body, the real Gwyneth Paltrow insisted on a body double for this shot because she's really not very happy with her own rear end. The next bunch of slides, I'm not going to have time to talk about teen movies. I think they're the most pernicious in terms of the dangers because that's the most vulnerable population. It does certainly lead to a premature sexualization of teens' bodies. American Pie, you all recognize on the right, particularly because of the casting. The gal on the right from American Pie there, initiating our hero into sex, is actually a 23-year-old porn star, but the viewer is expected to read her as a high school gal. And in the book, I talk about, again, the impact of some of these encounters on young viewers' eating behavior. And sexual behavior. Now, I just want to point out, I've up until now certainly been talking about the effect on the female body and women in particular, women and girls as a gendered issue, but I don't think we should ignore, not only because eating disorders are on the rise, but it's a really interesting observation that in the recent months, particularly this year, there's been this explosion of what we call muscle-bound movies, where male characters, whether it's Captain America or Conan the Barbarian here, are depicted in various stages of hyper-masculinity, hyper-muscularity. They're often filmed with oiled bodies so that the light can show the glistening sweat on their pecs. They are superhuman, they are forever the conqueror of all kinds of villainy. We're going to be talking this spring semester in my Screen Bodies course about how the male image becomes maybe politically and economically a kind of retro image of the time that males had more dominance economically. In the 20th century, had the loss of economic power, can represent then this kind of almost nostalgic quest for recapturing male power through a body image that is hyper-masculine, maybe a desire to have some kind of power back through these larger-than-life images on the screen. But don't kid yourself. The same gap between the male body ideal and the average male's body exists in a way that can lead young men and boys to engage in practices, again, that are not healthy, like steroid abuse or overworking the body. Take a look real quick, next slide. Dwayne Johnson, the hero of Fast Five, is 6'4". He has 23-inch biceps, 54-inch chest. The average male is 5'9", without any of those amazing measurements. And in that gap, which I call the very dangerous gap, the divide between ideal and real bodies, we often see disordered behaviors. Okay, lots of bleak news, lots of dire warnings about Hollywood. I hope each of you sitting here has seen at least one or two or three films that are anything but like these genres we've been looking at. Hollywood needs to make money. They need to export and globalize action stars and highly non-diverse bodies all over the world. Alternative cinema, indie films, for example, are much more successful, can afford to be. And while I don't have time to show you any of them, this movie is, well, let's just show a tiny little bit of it. I love it. How many people have seen Real Women Have Curves? And you know it provides a very different kind of world and a different statement about bodies. So this is a small indie film, never made much money, set in East LA. And so I didn't want to end without showing you the other possibilities that filmmakers certainly have availed themselves of to at least challenge some of the Hollywood messages about the perfect body. Notice the name of this film is called Real Women Have Curves. So I hope you all find some of your own in that regard. Before I end, I just want to take a quick moment to Emily, and I don't know if Alexa is here, just to come up and say a few words for those of you who are interested in media activism and also encouraging people on this campus to be more aware of eating disorders. Emily and Alexa are co-directors of the New Cope effort here at Northeastern, and they just want to say a word about what we've been doing this semester.